Good morning or good afternoon to everybody joining the webinar. We're just going to give it a moment to get a large group of people into the room, and we'll be kicking off within the next minute or two. So just be with us. We'll be starting shortly. Okay, the numbers are picking up nicely. We're on about 55 people or so. We'll give it a small bit of time to still pick up further, and then we will kick off very, very shortly. We're on quite a tight schedule today with only an hour. I think if we had to replan it, we'll probably give a little bit more time, but see how much we can cover in an hour. So I think I'm going to start with a short introduction as we wait for more people to join. So my name is Dion de Swart, and I'm one of the managing partners at Africa People Advisory Group, or APAG as we are more fondly known. And I am based in the beautiful city of Cape Town today, where it's actually quite wet and rainy, to be honest. And I'm going to hand over to Janine to just quickly do an introduction from her side.
Thank you, Dion. Hi, everyone. My name is Janine Schwartz. I'm also a managing partner for APAC on the SA side. I'm in Pretoria, Gauteng. We've got a more of a sunny day here, Dion, on our side. And looking forward to spending the time with you. Thanks.
Excellent. I think let's not delay further. So we're gonna start off. It's really going to be myself and Janine tag teaming today, and I think we've kind of agreed that after the introduction we will switch off cameras just to make sure that there is no disturbance in our communication. So we are very, very proud today to introduce you to the second installment of our New Ways of Working Pan-Africa Insight Study. When we started the business, it was really, really important for us, now almost 3 years ago, to start producing research that is relevant to the African continent. And we found, working for some of the large firms, that they produce really amazing content, but often it's not applicable to our continent. So it was really, really important for us that we have something that's totally relevant to the African continent. And we've had a really, really good growth in the participation in the survey, which this year we're calling New Ways of Working 2.0. So myself and Janine will be taking you through some content. And I just wanted to also mention that the full report was supposed to come out today. Unfortunately, one of the people in our team has suffered a personal setback. And because we are a people-first business, we've indicated that we will be launching and sending out the survey within the next week. So the full report will be available by the 25th, and we will obviously email it out to everybody that is on the webinar and everybody else that has requested a copy of the survey. So this year, our theme is developing a people-centric culture in the post-pandemic workplace. One of the key findings we found this year is that through hybrid working and after COVID and during COVID, we're really finding organizations that are starting to move more towards people centricity. And that really is the key theme for us this year. Just a very quick bit about ourselves. Africa People Advisory Group has been in existence for about 2.5 years. And there are two things that we are immensely, immensely passionate about. The one is Africa, and the second one is people. And I think if you look at our logo, you'll see the combination of people in Africa come together. So our passion really is working on the continent. We really work right across sub-Saharan Africa. And you're welcome to visit our website if you wanted to get a little bit more information. I think it's important to understand some of the context of our changing world. And in the launch last year, we shared a video around some of the key changes. I think we've got a good understanding of where technology is headed, but we wanted to give you a perspective of some of the changes that we've observed over the last year, big events. Of course, COVID is starting to ease. Even just walking in the shops in South Africa or flying on an airplane, I still find it strange that we're not wearing masks. Unfortunately, though, we've got a new outbreak. And I saw this morning we've got about 4 or 5 cases of monkeypox in South Africa. So that continues to be a concern. The war in Ukraine has really kind of, hit the world unexpectedly to some extent. And I think we all feel for the people suffering as a result of what is happening there. I check my Bitcoin every day. I'm a little bit worried that the price is quite low. I'm hoping it will go up. But of course, we've seen, quite a big tumble and a fall as far as Bitcoin is concerned. A couple of other ones that really stood out is Elon Musk, our own homegrown guy from Pretoria, and the whole Twitter saga that continues at this point in time. And then, of course, who can forget the Oscars? More in the entertainment industry, but something that kind of continues to make headlines even as we open newspapers on a regular basis. If we take it a little bit closer to home in our own kind of discipline of human capital, human resources, there's really three things that stand out for us. And I think the first one is that hybrid working models continue to grow. We've seen people starting to gradually return to brick and mortar, but a lot of organizations are still working within hybrid working models or remote working models. Of course, the rise of data, insights, and technology continue to grow substantially. A lot of the work and a lot of the engagement that we do in our firm at this point in time is around data and analytics and building skill in organizations to work with it effectively. And then, of course, a whole new trend, the Great Resignation, and really important for us to understand whether this is something that's also going to be prevalent on the African continent. So I'm going to hand over to Janine, that will be giving you a little bit of background to the study this year.
Thank you, Dion. You can go to the next slide. Thanks, everyone. So just a little bit of background in terms of the participation. As we all know, high quality Africa-based data in our field of HR is not always available. So the purpose of this new ways of is really to provide organizations access to reliable data-driven insights so that we can make better decisions. Our aim here is really to provide insights for Africa from Africa. So as Dion mentioned earlier, we saw a steady growth in terms of participation when compared to last year. In 2022, we had 188 participants from 148 different companies. 21 countries has been presented, and it's across 20 different industries. So that just, who participated. To dissect it a little bit more in terms of the industry sectors represented in the study, we see a lot of manufacturing and industrial, financial services, but also professional services, healthcare, and energy was presented. Highest participation in terms of countries was South Africa, Nigeria, Zimbabwe, but we also received some feedback from Ghana, Kenya, and some other countries on the continent. Just in terms of, to show you in terms of total headcount, in terms of the organizations that participated, there's an equal distribution in terms of large, medium, and small size businesses, but you can see there's a 25% percentage of organizations with employees more than 5,000. But then also the smaller companies. So it's nice to see that there's representation and we get insights from different views and different sizes of companies. The new ways of working survey was sent to a broad base of clients in the HR professional across the African continent. And our aim really is to see if there's any shifts from what we've observed last year and to give you some new trends and new emerging insights that we've seen. So I'm just going to let Dion introduce you to Imani. That's going to be part of our presentation during this course of this hour, and then also do an introduction on the 6 emerging trends that we've seen from the data that we just want to highlight with you today, and then we will go into depth in that.
Thanks so much, Janine. So as we've noted, progressive organizations are really the companies that embrace new ways of working. And it is our belief and our viewpoint that companies that embrace new ways of working and establish a people-centered culture are the kind of organizations that will not only win the war for talent, but also win the war for business. So we want to this year try a bit of a different approach, and we want to introduce you to Imani. So let's meet Imani. Imani is based in Nairobi, in Kenya. She's about 38 years of age, and she's a senior business development manager at a financial services organization. She's been with this organization for about 6 years. As far as her career history is concerned, she graduated top of her class with a marketing degree, started her career as an intern, a couple of marketing roles, and joined her current employer 6 years ago, where she's been in a current role for around about a year. She's very tech savvy and she really enjoys using all of the social media and work apps. And as much as her communication style is really good on electronics, She's exceptional with face-to-face communication, sitting in a business development kind of role. Imani has 2 kids, age 10 and age 2. And from a career perspective, it really is a passion to get into Exco within the next years. She's very ambitious and her career is absolutely key. But of course, she has a family and she tries to balance that. And she works the best when she's left alone. Of course, Africa is filled with people like Imani. And as we travel, we often meet, talents like her that really thrive in the right kind of environment. When we look a little bit at Imani's organization, let's call them Company X, the CEO is an old school manager. There are many levels within the organization. And as we find in many organizations that we work with, the grading structure and the layers are often based on tenure. So it's a tenure-based promotional system. Systems and processes are very manual, and there's a very, very low rate of adoption of technology. And memos are written on actual paper, not something that we come across that often. Turnover rates are very high, and often people leave to actually start their own businesses. Although COVID has forced employees in this organization to work remotely, there's been an instruction given this week that employees have to be back at the office physically on Monday, without exception. When we look at performance management, they still measure attendance, and the culture does not promote challenge and feedback. So it's a very top-down kind of culture. That, of course, results in levels of engagement that are very low. And we also find high levels of discrimination and a leadership style that's very much command and control. Lastly, as for the HR team, they're very focused on managing admin, quite reactive, not really in the consulting space. So as we progress through the presentation today and we cover the content, I want you to really ask yourself 3 questions. What do you think Imani's experience of a role is in a company? How likely do you think they are to lose her as a top resource? And do you think, what is the kind of lessons the CEO can learn from the trends that we will be sharing with you today? And then for yourself, reflecting on your own organization, is your organization making the best of creating a people-centered culture? Or do you sit in an organization with a culture that pushes people away? So I'm going to start and just very briefly share with you the 6 trends that we found in the study this year. The first one is that our traditional staffing structures and organizational structures are under pressure. Secondly, the African continent is definitely showing signs of an early Great Resignation, and we do believe it's a trend that requires more research and more focus into the future. As mentioned, remote and hybrid working models are very prevalent. And what we are finding through the research is that we are getting some productivity gains by people being able to work in hybrid and remote models. Performance management, which I think, to be honest, is long overdue for an overhaul. We're starting to see some big transformation as far as performance management as a practice is concerned. One of the key findings and the central themes for us this year is the post-pandemic workplace is highly people-centric, significantly more so than prior to the COVID pandemic. And then very lastly, the HR skills agenda has been very clear for a number of years. It is now time for action. We're not seeing the right kind of traction coming through as far as HR skills development is concerned. I'm going to hand over to Janine that will be talking you through the first 3 trends.
Thank you, Dion. Yes, as he's mentioned, traditional staffing and organization structures are under pressure. So one of the big shifts noted in this year's study is really the movement in the level of intention to change organizational structures and embark on job redesign. So from the graph on the left-hand side, you will see in 2021, there was only a 20% indication of intent to change organizational structures. We were quite surprised by the lack of focus on the redesign of structures and job design. So it's really encouraging for us to see this year that organizations are moving to a more focused approach on ensuring that their structures and their role content support direction in which technology is driving the world. More organizations are striving to flatten organizational structures, reduce their complexity, and increase simplicity to increase the efficiency and the speed of decision-making. So in other words, becoming more agile. So in terms of headcount changes, There's a slight, in terms of comparison with last year, there's a slight downward trend in intent to reduce employee count. We saw a difference from 41% to 38% this year, as well as a slight rise in the intent to increase headcount, which is a positive, which moved from 29 to 30%. So it's not significant, but we do see a little bit of change. The one focus that remained, that is quite prevalent coming out in terms of the data, is the intention to use contract and gig workers. So from the stats, you can see 41% of organizations indicated that they will in future make use of contractors or gig workers. Some showed no change, others are still unsure or making plans for that. Just to show you an indication of what is happening globally, we see this trend of increase of gig workers across the globe. And it's currently reported that 35% of all employees or the workforce globally is freelancers, which is quite astonishing in terms of the stats. So just for your information, there's a few of the apps or websites that freelancers are currently using to where they market themselves, upload their CVs, where they get projects from. And we actually saw 9 African websites where the freelancers can access and do work across the continent as gig workers. The one focus that has remained constant is the list of in-demand positions for which organizations are recruiting. So the top 5 list of skills in demand has remained relatively stable. There was a few shifts compared to last year, but the demands are still the same. Reflecting on a study from the World Economic Forum, the in-demand jobs are still quite focused on technology, sales, data science, and leadership. And you will see those skills are aligned with what we've seen in our study as well. Just a reflection on your side, we're asking the question, have you noticed that if Imani skills is on this list? If you go through all of them. In terms of the first trend, just some recommendations from our side, what we've seen from our clients, what we've seen in the research and from the data is really to critically go and review your organization structure with a view to understand the impact of the technology, the structure, as well as what is your strategy and is this supporting your strategy in terms of the structure. Ongoing and regular review of job grades, especially as Dion mentioned with Imani, where promotion is based on tenure and not complexity. As soon as these structures change, the jobs affected by these changes should be reevaluated to ensure that remuneration is also aligned. And then the third one, build a pipeline of talent with future skills by first defining the organization's future capabilities and skills. We need to make sure that the capabilities that we need in future is aligned to what we are moving and what our strategy is. Just some questions for you in terms of Imani. How will company X structure enable Imani's aspirations? So remember, we said the structure has multiple layers and grades driven by a tenure-based promotional system. So we said Imani has been in a role for 1 year. The tenure-based system only allows for promotion after 3 years. As you can see from the table on the right, on the 9 box, she's a high performer with high potential. But despite being the top end of the 9 box grid, she's not eligible for promotion yet. Imani has an offer to join a new forward-thinking startup. The money is not amazing, but a new role will be an exco role. What do you think is the risk of Imani leaving? So that's just the question on your side, okay, for you to reflect on. Thanks, Dion. So the second trend that we want to talk about is the Great Resignation, and are we seeing any signs of it in Africa compared to what we're seeing global? So by now, most of us have heard this term, and everyone is talking about the Great Resignation. Africa is well known for the Great Migration, but a new migration is threatening the stability of our businesses across Africa. So this whole trend started in the US, and you can see from this graph what we've shown on the slides for you is really a big increase in terms of people resigning or leaving their jobs since 2020. There's quite a big increase. And most of the employees said they are leaving because of better benefits or remuneration or better work-life balance, or lack of recognition. So those are the trends that we've seen globally and in the US that's been reported. As Dion mentioned earlier, this is really a topic in Africa that we really need to explore and further investigate. But we ask you the question in the study so that we can see whether or not there is shifts. 51% of participants responded to observing an increase in resignations in the organization, which is quite high. The main reason for resignations that has been reported is that people find new positions, they look for career changes, and better opportunities at other organizations. So that's just to keep in mind. It's still very slow and might be in its baby stages, but it's still something to keep track of. Some of the recommendations linked to the strength is really to strengthen your talent management strategy to counter the potential impact that the Great Resignation can have in our organizations and for Africa. We need to preempt what the potential risks are and how we can counteract it. Second, develop or firm up the retention strategy. It's so critical that we retain our client, our talent in our organizations. The retention strategy should always address both monetary and non-monetary elements. And then the last one, it's really important, is to understand our data. Data is so key and it's so critical to understand what is the risk, and we can look at the data to look at exit interviews, parting interviews, people that are staying, so that we know what are the reasons why they are leaving or are staying. Okay, just the last thing on Imani. Do you think Imani will become part of the statistic? The CEO is an old school manager. Systems and processes are manual and there are a very low adoption rate of technology. Memos are written on actual paper. Employee turnover rates are very high. Most people leave to start their own small businesses. As we've mentioned, Imani is a high-performing, high-potential employee with limited prospects and is stuck in a bad organizational culture. She is tech-savvy and wants a challenge. The risk of Imani becoming a statistic of the Great Resignation might be great. Okay, thank you, Dion. I'm going to give over to him to discuss the next few trends with you.
Thank you so much, Janine. So trend number 3 is all about hybrid and remote working. And I think it's important that we understand that what we're seeing in the research is a potential positive impact as far as productivity is concerned. We want to run a very quick poll that I'm going to put up on the screen, because it's always interesting to always see whether people actually share the sentiment. So it should be opening up on your screen shortly. And the key question is, am I currently working in a hybrid or a full remote working environment? We want to get a sense where people in the actual webinar are working, whether they are working remotely, whether it's full hybrid, or whether they are actually back at work, whether they're being forced back to work from a physical office. So we just at about 50% participation, some interesting trends coming out. I'm going to give it another 10, 15 seconds. The numbers are picking up quite nicely. We're at about 63% completed now. I'll get it to about 70% and then share the results with you. Right, we're very, very close on 70%. Great to see the levels of participation being quite high. And we are on about 74, 75%, almost 100 people. So let me share with you what we've got. I'm not sure if it's going to come up on your screen, so just confirming, but about 72% of people attending the webinar today indicate that they currently work in some kind of hybrid or full remote, and 27% indicate that they are actually not working in a hybrid working model. Now, with that in mind, let's call it a 70-30 split. The second question is, do you actually support a hybrid working model? And that would be interesting. We won't run the poll right now, but we often find that not all people necessarily actually support a full hybrid working model either. So let's just try and distinguish between the two. When we talk about hybrid working, it really is a blend where people sometimes work in the office and they sometimes work remotely. And when we say remotely, we don't want to assume that they work from home. Yes, many people do. But some people also have other arrangements. I've got an ex-colleague with small kids, and he actually works from a friend's office because he finds it a little bit more productive. Remote working is the practice where employees do their jobs from another location. So there is no obligation on people to actually come into an office. Now, just out of interest, that's a couple of pictures of some of our employees or some of the partners working from home. We don't have the full team here, but we've in our organization made quite a conscious decision not to have physical offices. So we all work from home. We often work on airplanes. We work from coffee shops. We work from clients' offices, wherever it makes sense. When we look at some of the feedback coming from the study, what we've seen is that 71% of organizations now have some kind of policy in place that governs their remote or hybrid working practices. And that's quite a nice tick up from last year where we were on 67%. It is sad, though, to see that 30% of employers are still forcing people to go to an actual office. And, we work with a couple of companies. The one that I'm thinking about specifically in the SADC region very proudly announced that their people are all back at work. Now, of course, there are certain jobs that you can't do remotely, but in many cases, we believe it's a step back when people start working back at a physical office on a full-time basis. You'll see 30% of people work in a shift kind of system. And then, of course, 23% of people can decide where they want to work from. And when we look at the next one, which is really all about productivity, the question that we asked is, have you seen an increase or a decrease in productivity with people working remotely? And what we've seen is about 20% of organizations have said that we've observed a decrease in productivity, but 40% of companies have said that we've actually seen productivity gains. So from a productivity perspective, we believe the ability to work remotely really helps organizations to up your level of performance and productivity. I guess the one potential downside is, how do you actually get people integrated? How do you get people to work effectively as a team? How do you build relationships? And so 20% of companies have reported that since people have gone back to the office, they've seen an increase in morale. And I think that is important to think about. If you have a hybrid working model or remote working, how do we make sure that we can actually get people to engage and still build the appropriate relationships? So as far as hybrid and remote working is concerned, we've got 3 recommendations. The first one is, we need to understand what your employees want. I think we've learned over the last couple of years that we cannot make decisions on behalf of employees. Of course, we have to balance that with your work delivery model. The second item is that when you go and develop your policy, make sure that you have a cut of people involved in the development of that policy that represents all organizational levels and groupings. So at least make sure that they are consulted. And then, of course, continue to benchmark. If you want to be a best employer and a top employer and you sit in a specific market, try and understand what is happening around you to make sure that you remain competitive. So where does this leave Imani? We've already indicated to you that COVID has forced people to work remotely, but there's been a decree given that they need to be back in the office on Monday. We also know that from a performance management perspective, there isn't a very strong culture. They measure attendance and the culture does not promote challenge and feedback. Imani, as we indicated, is a mother. She really enjoys the flexibility and she enjoys being able to attend certain events that her kids participate in at school. So a job offer at the new startup is an opportunity to work in a hybrid working model, and she can choose her own working hours. So the rhetorical question that we ask here is, do you think she'll stay or do you think she's going to leave the organization? When we look at the fourth trend, which is all around performance management, what we see is some big shifts as far as performance management is concerned. And I've taken this slide. We've been using this slide actually since the first month that we started the business. And it's partially sourced from the Josh Person Academy. And he was really looking at some of the key shifts that we are observing as far as performance management is concerned. And 3 key themes: ongoing, which means that we're moving to a model where it's no longer performance management, but more enablement. We're moving into a simplified OKR kind of approach of setting KPIs, a very big development focus, and moving away from forced ranking. So ongoing, it's very engaging in the sense that there's regular feedback and engagement with employees, team-based KPIs, and then, of course, tech-enabled through things like multi-rater feedback and a focus on simplicity. And we believe that this is still very, very relevant in today's time. So 51% of organizations have indicated that they are planning changes to their performance management system. And For me personally, having observed how many companies do this, I find this to be quite an exciting development as far as performance management is concerned. One of the key changes we're seeing is the measurement of behavior. So 74% of organizations are now measuring behavior as part of their performance management process. And 86% of those are saying that the measurement of behavior actually impacts your final rating. So the message here is that getting work delivered is important, but how work delivered is of equal importance. So we're starting to build cultures where we want to get people to be able to give and receive feedback around the way that they impact teams. The major changes that we're seeing, or the planned changes, is the implementation of technology. Many clients that we work with still have paper-based systems, a focus on team-based KPIs. A very important one for me is the movement towards output-based KPIs. So we don't want to measure activity. We want to measure what is the outcome and the impact of that activity. So there's a couple of changes that we've seen. Now, as far as our recommendations are concerned, there really are two key ones. The first one is to really relook the way that you write your KPIs and to make sure that you focus on output-based KPIs as opposed to activity-based. Be very intentional about the way that you introduce your behavioral feedback. So I personally, when I work with clients on 360 measures and multi-rated feedback, I typically recommend that you start at the most senior level of the organization and then introduce and phase it over a couple of years. And of course, very lastly is to make sure that we enable it through the use of appropriate technology. So when we think about performance management and the way that Imani experiences it, we've already said that the systems and processes are very manual. I mean, they use actual paper to write memos on. And one of the key metrics in performance management is attendance. So from her perspective, it's a very cumbersome, it's a very paper-based process. And in fact, the administration involved in the performance management process makes it so difficult that you can't actually get to your normal work. That is how complicated and time-consuming it is. So, if we wanted to take a view of how effective they are as far as the performance management process is concerned, we would probably give it a 1 out of 10. The fifth trend that I'm going to deal with is the post-pandemic workplace, which is highly people-centric. I came across this quote or this picture from Simon Sinek on LinkedIn last week, and I really, really loved it. He says, "Customers will never love a company until the employees love it first." And this really resonated with me in preparing and thinking about a post-pandemic workplace. One of the key enablers as far as the culture of the organization is concerned is, of course, leadership. And what we are finding in the leadership spectrum is 5 competencies that we believe will be critical into the future. Connect authentically, clear communication, the ability to be really agile, building collaborative relationships, and continuous improvement. And connecting authentically really speaks to the core of people centricity. I see an ex-colleague, Louise Simpson, on the line, and I know that she will agree around this big focus on being an authentic leader. The question that we then asked is, but if you had to rate this on a scale from 1 to 10, how would you actually rate your current leaders on these competencies? When we look at the set of competencies from last year, we had a 6.46 out of 10. This year, it's actually dropped very, very slightly to 6.44. So what we see is there's a big need to continue focusing on building your leadership effectiveness. And the interventions that organizations are using focuses on coaching, on leadership programs, on mentorship, online learning, and to some extent also looking at job shadowing. Employee wellness continues to be a very big focus in this year's survey. And I think what we want to emphasize is to say that it's not all about the physical stuff. There's a very big focus on emotional wellness. It is encouraging to see that companies that are focused on having an employee wellness strategy has improved by 10% from last year, so from 61 to 71. And the key focus areas of these wellness strategies focuses on expanded flexibility, wellness seminars, more awareness, regular team engagements, and a big focus on work-life balance. The key shift this year for us really is about employee experience. So I want to share a short video by Jacob Morgan on employee experience, and I'll ask my colleagues just to confirm that the sound is clear.
As humans, we all care about having great and positive experiences. It's something that we all take so serious. We save up to travel the world and see new places. We'll go through great lengths to put smiles on our faces. Even though creating amazing experiences is quite the endeavor, we know that the memories we create will stay with us forever. But why does the experience have to stop when we show up to work? When we get to the office and feel like we want to go berserk? Speaking of work, most of us around the world are not even engaged. In fact, the numbers are so low we should all feel enraged. Most of us work in offices with gray walls and tall cubicles. Every company we go to, it's more of the usual. And the leaders we work with, who we all call our bosses, they cut their people when the company experiences losses. These are the leaders who are supposed to have our backs, the ones who once a year are willing to give you feedback. Our leaders and organizations are not ready for the future. Sometimes it feels like we're living and working in one giant blooper. Employees are using outdated tools and technologies. To be honest, our leaders owe us an apology. But now, we have the time and the opportunity to rethink what we know about work. And it's not just about giving your people the new shiny perk. Let's rethink culture, technology, and physical space. Let's create a place where we would all love to show our face. A leader should be like your guide and your coach, someone who you can easily approach. A leader should be invested in helping you go far, to become even more successful than they are. The technology you use should allow you to get things done with ease, making the projects and tasks you gotta get done a breeze. And dare I say with a smirk, that all organizations around the world should be investing in flexible work. Our spaces shouldn't depress and deflate. Instead, they should inspire and motivate. Now is the time to make change happen. Now is the time to move from words to action. My hope is that leaders and organizations, and all of us who are fed up with the frustration, are going to come together to create a new type of an organization, something that can help the entire population. Remember, as humans, we all care about the experience. So my question to you is, now that you've seen this video, what are you going to do with it?
I always recommend individuals and companies to follow Jacob Morgan. I think he's got some really insightful thinking around the world of employee experience. So what we often find when we engage with organizations is that they don't necessarily have a clear understanding of what employee experience or EX is. Many organizations still believe that it's all around employee engagement. Employee engagement is a very important mechanism in order to take a pulse of where the organization is. And it is encouraging to see this year that 76% of the organizations or the people that we surveyed have some kind of measurement as far as employee engagement is concerned. 60% of that is a full survey that runs either annual or biannually. And then, of course, 20% regular pulse surveys. And where we want organizations to move is the 10%. So that would be snap surveys right throughout the employee experience. If we look at the impact on performance ratings, then 58% of organizations are saying that the outcome of the engagement survey actually impacts the final rating of the manager. And there you can see on the right-hand side, just some benchmark data. Of course, this is just a stake in the ground where 25% organizations are trying to achieve an engagement percentage between 80 and 90, 40%, 70 to 80, and a small percentage, 20 at 70%. Of course, one can't standardize because of rating scales and questions and so forth, but it gives you some kind of indicator. Now let's move from engagement into employee experience, which for me personally is one of the most exciting developments to hit the human capital and human resources field in recent years. We've seen quite a big increase this year to last year as far as a focus on EX is concerned. So organizations that have adopted the principles of EX have moved up from 27% last year, which was a big concern, to 42% this year. And 52% of respondents say there's somebody in the HR team now accountable for EX. The small bit that worries me here is the 10% on the left-hand side. And these are human resources representatives that haven't heard of the term EX. So I think organizations will do well in educating themselves to understand what EX is a little bit better. When we start looking at the further rise, 38% have indicated that they've got some kind of end-to-end measure in place as far as EX is concerned. And we believe that it's a game changer. It really has the ability to move our function forward in a very, very big way. When we look at what respondents believe is the biggest focus or practices with the biggest impact on EX, then organizational culture comes in with 14% votes. Employee development, you could see my relationship with my manager. Onboarding, so critical. So few organizations are getting it right. If there's one disappointment in the study this year, and I will say, unfortunately, once again, it has to be diversity and inclusion. And I picked up this picture on the internet that I really, really liked. If you think about the fact that on the top, we see things like skin color and gender and race and age, there's so much more that sits at the bottom. So from a D&I perspective, and I was engaging with an ex-colleague that contributed to the report, Samkelo Blom, and Samkelo was saying, the correct terminology is actually diversity, inclusion, and belonging, because the question is also whether people feel that they actually belong. So only 49% of organizations saying that we actually have a clear strategy in place. And as I said last year, I really believe that in Africa, the bar should be set a lot higher. Then, of course, only 43% of organizations actually have this as an active part of their KPIs. So there's a lot more that needs to happen around diversity and inclusion into the future. When we ask companies that do have a strategy, what is your big focus areas? Female representation comes out very strongly at 42%. And then the overall focus on D&I from a cultural perspective at 30%. And also encouraging to see that we want to upskill leaders, although it's a small percentage, to be able to work better with D&I. Now, when we go back to a conversation about Imani and we say, do you think the organization is truly people-centric? If we look at all the characteristics that we've seen, do we think that they will achieve any kind of significant rating? It is probably unlikely. So from a recommendations perspective, when we start looking at this people-centric organization, we really believe it starts with leadership, and organizations need to identify the competencies and capabilities that are important for your organization as far as leadership is concerned. We absolutely need to continue the journey of employee wellness. We need to continue building the skills of leaders to be able to work with wellness and have a clearly defined strategy. And then as far as EX is concerned, organizations should be starting somewhere to adopt the principles of EX, to start the measurement, to set up cross-functional teams to work effectively with it. But of course, very lastly, is diversity. It's a very clear focus on having a strategy that encourages the right levels of diversification and culture and belonging in organizations. I'm going to hand over to Janine that will be dealing with the sixth and the last trend.
Thank you, Dion. So the last trend that we were discussing today is the HR skills development agenda. It's clear, but the time for action is now. This slide we shared with you last year, and it's just nice to reflect on again, and we just wanted to highlight it again. HR needs to change from human resources to people and culture professionals, from policy enforcers to employee experience ambassadors, from process-driven to people-driven, sharing a little to sharing a lot, and saying no to rather saying yes. So just some food for thought, forcing fun and encouraging culture. Last year, the study identified several critical skills for human resource professionals. We wanted to see what is it that we need to obtain to keep on supporting our business strategically. In this year's study, we wanted to determine if there's any shifts, but it stayed relatively the same than last year. Here from the graph, you can see HR and people analytics still on the top, business acumen, strategic workforce planning, organizational design, and strategic consulting skills is important. We also asked the question, do we as organizations invest in building these type of skills that we've identified? 35% indicated no, 32% said yes, and fortunately there are some of the organizations saying that they are actually planning for this in the next year so that we can address these top rated skills for HR. When we also asked to rate the current capability of HR professionals against skills that we've listed, and the following findings emerged. The most proficient skill that was identified was business acumen with a 61% rating. So it's either being proficient or highly proficient. And it was followed by strategic consulting skills, which was rated at 53% of proficiency level. The skill with the lowest proficiency rating was identified as workforce planning with a 55%. And then the one that we also think is critical is HR and people analytics with only a 54% rating on either non-proficient. So let's talk about analytics. The workforce analytics measurement continuum provides a useful view of where organizations should focus their analytical efforts. So the ideal approach is to move away from the perspective of what is happening, which is on the left-hand side where you can see on the left graph, and move towards the why and where is it happening, which is on the right of the continuum. The progression is obviously a journey and maturity builds over time, so we won't get it right overnight, but it's good to see where we should put our focus on. So on the right-hand side of the graph, you will see the feedback from the study. Sorry, Dion, can you just go back? I just want to quickly stand still here. So the feedback that we've seen is really that there's little movement in terms of working towards the simulation, forecasting, and predictive analytics. However, we did see a little bit of improvement of organizations with focus who used to focus on reactive checks last year that is now more focused on regular reports, and that is encouraging for us. But from the stats, you can see the in terms of the curve, there's very low percentages, 5%, 6% in terms of reporting on the future analytics that we are looking for. The new roles for HR. So we've discussed this last year, but what are the new skills that HR professions should build to enable us to address these new ways of working? And it's still to be leadership coaches, to be organizational structure designers, to be cultural ambassadors, and as Dion mentioned in the previous trend, to be employee experience facilitators to really drive these initiatives, and to be employee wellness champions. We've seen from the last 2 years how critical it is that we look after our employees and that people take ownership of the wellness of the employees. But what we said in the trend, action is really lacking. One of the major concerns coming out from the study this year is that most HR functions lack a robust plan to develop the required skills that we've identified. It has really become critical for human resource functions to invest themselves, to invest money, to invest the time so that we can make sure that we build these skills to support and to enable our business to deliver their mandate and their strategy and to grow into the future. Thanks, Dion. So just on recommendations in terms of the strength, just the two from what we've seen is really to identify future focused skills for HR in your own business. As we've mentioned, it's really important to look at your own organization and look at what you need at this stage. Every business is different. Every business is in a different maturity stage. So it's really important to go and identify what is it that we need for the future in HR. And then also another recommendation is really to do an audit in terms of your current HR skills and to know where to invest in the long-term development initiatives and where to focus on and where to spend the money. So now trust HR to support the business to retain her skills. The HR team are focused on record keeping and managing administration. And we know now from Imani that is not where her love lies. What is the likely outcome here? They will retain her. They will try and encourage the CEO to retain her if they can get time in his diary, or they will send her all the forms to complete for her exit, which will take a few days to complete. Imani's next step. The COO has called her to try and convince her to stay. So we found time in his diary. He has offered her a substantial increase and the flexibility to work in a hybrid model. She will also in future report to him and be part of the ExCo. So I don't know if I can just ask you to run the quick poll. We just want to ask you and get answers from you. Does Imani stay or does she leave?
Okay, we're on about 25% completed. I see there's really good participation. We're on about 50%. I'll let it run to about 70% and then give you the results of it. We'll give it another 15, 20 seconds. We're on about 60% completed. Very interesting results, quite different to what I expected in setting up the poll. Right, I'll let it run for another 5 or 6 seconds, then we should be on about 70% completed. Okay, we just shy of 100 people. Okay, I'm not sure if the results are coming up. I'll read it out in any case. So 42% of people have said that Imani will stay based on the offer that she's received to stay. And 47% of people have said, the majority have said that she is likely to leave the organization, with about 11% of people being unsure. So Imani has indeed accepted the offer, and she starts in 4 weeks. And once again, it is a very similar trend to what we see with high potential people leaving organizations. And I guess an indication of what we can expect in the Great Resignation in Africa. So just a couple of closing remarks from my side. I think I'm thinking about, what it is that we can do. What are the 3 key takeouts that we'd recommend for organizations if they're not there yet? First of all, is to fast track your efforts on employee experience. And what we're saying is start somewhere. Best practice would mean that you put together a multidisciplinary and multifunctional team. You'll start looking at quick wins. We encourage you to go read up about it if you're not familiar with it. Start collecting some of the data and start your efforts somewhere as far as EX is concerned. The second item is to really start thinking about what is the kind of data that I can gather to analyze trends and patterns within the human capital function within the workforce. So really sharpening your efforts around workforce metrics and analytics, because it'll start helping you have a systemic impact on many of your people practices and processes. And very lastly, to adopt a proactive approach to the risk of the Great Resignation. So as much as we often conduct these exit interviews, the question is, can you maybe move that over and start thinking about stay interviews, encouraging people and especially talent to understand where they are at, to understand what are some of the pain points that they've got. So those would be the 3 core recommendations that we will leave with you. Right, that brings us to the end of the presentation this afternoon with a few minutes to spare. I'm just also adding in our company details as far as the email addresses and the LinkedIn page is concerned, as well as our website. Please feel free to reach out to us. The recording will be made available on our website if all goes well this afternoon still. So it will be posted to our YouTube channel, which you can get through our website. And we will make the deck available afterwards in an email communication over the next few days. As mentioned, unfortunately, due to some personal circumstances, we've had to delay the publishing of the report. But our current target date is to get it out by the 25th. So we really encourage you to spend some detailed time on the report that will contain a lot more content. And Nicolette, I see there was a question whether we can also share the link to the video. I'll be more than happy just to give you a link to the video as well. So we've got 2 or 3 minutes or maybe 4 minutes for any particular questions or comments that we might have. Hi, Mary. I saw there was an earlier comment from Mary. Hi, Mary. I hope things are well in Nairobi. And I saw just a comment from Kudzai saying that they needed to step out. So it will all be available. Are there any questions or comments that we want answered? I see there is a question presumably from Nigeria. Please go ahead. Is it Oluwagesun? I think we might have a problem just getting you on. So let me just see if we can get you to speak. Okay, you should be able to unmute and speak now.
Hi, good morning. Can you hear me, Dion?
Yes, I can hear you clearly.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. This session has been quite enlightening. Thank you for that. Quick one. I would like to know your views regarding social media policy. So I read an article recently on the need to start incorporating social media policy in HR policy catalogs. And my concern is how do you ensure that the privacy of the employee is not affected in the process? The reason why some people are saying it is that, okay, so disciplinary measures can be taken if employees, say things that could affect the organization, of course, that's fine. But how do you ensure that the policy doesn't also affect the privacy of the employee? That's my concern. Thank you.
Yeah, so I see you start with the most difficult question. So let me take an attempt at this. I want to understand, are you talking about the use of social media in the workplace? Or are you talking about what people get up to outside of workplace on social media? So just want to clarify.
Yes, outside of workplace.
Outside, right. So I do think, outside of the policy, you probably have some kind of code of conduct and most companies have some kind of code of conduct these days that talk about the way that you are supposed to represent the organization in the public space. So I would say your starting point needs to be to go back to your code of conduct and to the policies that govern that. And I mean, we work with a company in South Africa that actually does social media screening. So what happens is when people apply for positions and they try and portray a specific, image of who and what they are, you can actually go and do quite legally a deep dive on their social media and find out quite interesting things about, perhaps what they say in the public domain. But I would say you've got to be guided by your code of conduct that employees typically would be requested to sign on joining. So that's probably the approach that I would take. And the code of conduct should then be interpreted in line with whatever happens on social media. I think people get very irresponsible. And sometimes even to the point where they are, saying really bad things about their own organization. And I do believe there are internal mechanisms to deal with those kind of issues. But code of conduct, I would say, should be the guiding light. I see a couple of other questions just from Philip, whether there's key differentiators or key differences between South Africa and the rest of Africa. So Philip, at this point in time, we've only taken a cut of the overall data. We've had a request from Kenya specifically to look at some East Africa data. So more than happy, to share with you some of the input on the South African side. But we haven't done the in-depth cutting and slicing and dicing of data to be able to tell you whether South Africa is predominantly or vastly different from the rest of Africa. So it might be a bit unfair for me to take a view on it, but happy to engage with you separately if you've got a need for more information on it. Right, perhaps one more question or comment. So once again, just assuring you that the recording will be made available. The slide deck will be made available. There will be an email going out with a link to both of these, and the report will be made available on the 25th as well. There's a question here from Sanisha. How are companies managing and tracking remote working employees to know their location? I would ask a counter question to that, Sanisha, that might be a little bit unfair. And the question will be, why would the location matter? So if you are working in a remote working model, or people are working in a hybrid working model, I would argue that where people work should probably not be relevant. And that's just my own perspective. So, I believe that people should be allowed to work from anywhere, provided that they can achieve their targets. So in our own company, we've got a very simple philosophy with any new employees coming in. We don't have stipulated leave days. People have unlimited leave. And we also don't have stipulated, a workplace or stipulated working hours. So what we're very focused on is measuring the outcome or the output of what the person needs to achieve. How, when, and where they do that for us is less relevant. And it does take a specific approach as far as culture is concerned. And a lot of people struggle with it initially, but we're quite focused on trying to build that kind of culture. Okay, so also a question from Benson around what are the common strategies being used in Africa to improve employee experience. So Benson, I think the starting point is measurement. The starting point is to understand when people join the organization, what is the onboarding experience? When people leave the organization, what's the information that we find in exit interviews? When people go through a performance management cycle, what is the experience that they go through in having those conversations when they get allocated a rating? So the starting point is to measure, to introduce measures and surveys and snap surveys across many of your high impact people processes, and then to start working on fixing those, really start with the low hanging fruit. Right, so we have run out of time. We really, really appreciate everybody attending the conversation this afternoon. And as per our commitment, we will make sure that an email goes out with the appropriate deck and links. And thank you very much for joining us, and feel free to visit us on social media or on our website. Have a good afternoon to everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.